You are listening to the Place We Find Ourselves podcast. I'm Adam Jung, your host. I'm sorry that this episode is coming out so late. My father went into hospice care 2 weeks ago and died within 36 hours. I was at his bedside along with my brothers and sister-in-law when he died. It was a holy time, but grief can be complicated and push things like podcast episodes aside. So that's why this episode is so late. I'm also just getting over the flu, and so my voice is far from high quality, so you'll just have to bear with me. Last time, we talked about 3 of the primary symptoms of trauma. And today I want to go into depth about the 3rd symptom that someone with a history of trauma deals with. If you have experienced trauma, you likely have difficulty with the whole category of kindness, either receiving kindness from others or being kind to your own heart and body, or likely both. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, let me throw some questions out there. What's it like for you when someone gives you a genuine compliment? How do you respond to them? What is it like for you to be celebrated? I mean, how do you feel inside when someone throws a party to celebrate your birthday? For my 35th birthday, my wife gave me a present. It was a rectangle, and it looked like the box that a dress shirt might be in, except it was heavier than a shirt, a lot heavier. And as I began to open it, I saw for the first time in my life the pristine Apple computer product packaging. It was a 15-inch MacBook Pro. I had only been a Windows user up until that day. And when I realized what was in this box, something in my body recoiled. I mean, literally, my body went back into the couch that I was sitting in. I couldn't receive it. I pushed the box away from me and closed my eyes and said, "No, I don't think so." Now, what is that all about? What is going on there? What happens inside of you when someone is truly delighting in you? What's it like for you when someone offers you kindness? Can you receive it? And conversely, and just as importantly, what's it like for you when you are in need of kindness? Is it easy to ask a close friend or a spouse for care and support when you are in need of care and support? When you're not doing well, when you are struggling for whatever reason, a relational conflict, or you messed up at work, or you're just anxious about something, when you're struggling, what is your posture toward yourself? For many of us, when we're not doing well, when we're struggling, we tend to get angry at ourselves for not doing well. In other words, in those moments when we are most in need of care and soothing, it's often those moments when we are the most harsh with ourselves. It's this sense of, why are you so upset about this? Why are you letting that person get under your skin again? Why are you letting them affect you so much? Or if you're anxious and fearful, do you have a posture of, this is because you don't trust God enough? If you had faith like so-and-so, you wouldn't be so anxious and afraid all the time. What is that? It's self-contempt. But it's not merely self-contempt. It's self-contempt in the precise moment when you are most in need of care and kindness. This is what I mean when I say that traumatized people have a war with kindness. How is it that you are harshest with yourself when you are most in need of care and comfort? Might it have something to do with your immense need for kindness and your massive ambivalence about receiving it. When you get dysregulated, when your body floods with cortisol, what do you notice about your posture toward your suffering body? When I get dysregulated, sometimes I chastise myself for being weak, for being not mature enough. How is it that my dysregulation becomes the occasion for me to accuse myself of not having grown enough, not having matured enough? Or sometimes when I get dysregulated, I get mad at myself for being so affected by the situation. I'm angry at my heart for being hurt or anxious by the situation. There is a very poignant Carl Jung quote that exposes, I think, lots and lots of us here. It's a full paragraph, but very important, and I'm going to read it. This is what Carl Jung writes. That I feed the hungry, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ. All these are undoubtedly great virtues. What I do to the least of my brethren, that I do unto Christ. But what if I should discover that the least among them all, the poorest of all the beggars, the most impudent of all the offenders, that these are within me, and that I myself stand in need of the alms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy that must be loved? What then? As a rule, the Christian's attitude is then reversed. There is no longer the question of any love or compassion. We say to the brother within us, you fool, and condemn and rage against ourselves. That's Carl Jung. Now, what's he saying? He's saying first that you have a relationship with yourself. And let's just start with that for a moment. Many Christians don't want to admit that they have a relationship with themselves. Why? Well, I don't know. My guess is because it feels self-centered, self-indulgent, self-absorbed. I'm supposed to be thinking of others, not myself. That's the reasoning I think that many people have. But look, you have a relationship with yourself. You can't not. And what do I mean by relationship? I mean that at every moment of the day, you have a posture toward your own heart. And over the course of your day, you are constantly engaged in inner dialogue with your heart. You can't avoid this. Why? Well, because God created you with what's called a default mode network in your brain. The default mode network is like the Mr. T area of the brain. It's the mohawk area of the brain. It runs from the front to the back, right along the midline. And one job of the default mode network is to enable you to think about yourself. For some reason, many Christians feel like thinking about themselves is a bad thing, but it's not. It's a human thing. If God made your brain with a default mode network, God must have an interest in you spending some of your time thinking about your heart, your mind, your body, yourself. So you have a relationship with yourself. If that's true, how would you describe the dynamics of your relationship with yourself? If I asked you to describe the dynamics of your relationship with your spouse or your boss or your best friend, you could put some sentences together. You could say some things about those relationships. What characterizes your relationship with you? Would you describe that relationship as warm? Affectionate? Or would you say sometimes the relationship can be pretty harsh, pretty unforgiving? Sometimes it can be outright contemptuous. In order to engage this third symptom of trauma, this whole category of kindness toward yourself, you have to become aware of what your current relationship with yourself is like, because you have one. You can't not. Okay, back to Carl Jung. What else is he saying? He's saying that most Christians believe they are called to be kind and compassionate to the hurting, the poor, the outcasts, the needy, the suffering. Okay, great, says Jung, great. But what happens when the hurting person is you? What's your stance toward the hurting one then? What's your stance toward the needy one then? And Jung says that for many Christians, the posture is utterly contemptuous. So, are you a Christian? Do you believe that your Creator calls you to be kind to the hurting, the poor, the needy, the vulnerable, the dysregulated? If you do, what is your posture when the hurting person is within you? Are you kind when the needy person is you rather than your neighbor? I can say that personally, I am often not kind. I can be far kinder and more compassionate toward others in pain than toward myself when I am in pain. Why is that? I know I'm not alone in this. How is it that many of us are far kinder to our friends when they are hurting than we are toward ourselves when we are hurting? What's going on? Perhaps it has to do with this third symptom of trauma, problems receiving kindness, and especially problems being kind to ourselves. Are you willing to bring soothing, care, comfort to your body when it is dysregulated? For me, it can be so hard to be willing to bring care and soothing to my body when I get dysregulated. Why? Because I'm mad at myself for being dysregulated. I'm mad at my body for being so affected by whatever has upset me. Why does this person affect me so much? Why is this situation upsetting my body so much? And so we become at war with our bodies, which is to say, we become at war with our frailty. About a decade ago, I heard Dan Allender say a few sentences that have always stuck with me. And this is what he said. He said, the hard work of life is not dealing with your pain. The hard work of life is allowing yourself to experience comfort and kindness from others and from yourself. Let me say it again. The hard work of life, he's saying, it's not dealing with your pain. The hard work of life is allowing yourself to experience comfort and kindness from others and from yourself. Now, as counterintuitive as that sounds, I have found it to be quite true for me and for many others. It is very hard to allow myself to experience comfort and kindness. What is comfort? The word comfort comes from the Latin prefix com, C-O-M, meaning with, and the Latin root fortis, meaning strong. Fortis is where we get our word fort from, a strong fort. In other words, comfort is being with to strengthen. Being with someone to strengthen them. Comfort means, etymologically, the word comfort means to be with someone out of a desire to strengthen them. Now, back to Allender's words. The hard work of life is allowing yourself to experience kindness and comfort, and I would say especially comfort from yourself. What does that mean? What does it mean to experience comfort from yourself? Well, there's a little psalm that provides a beautiful picture of comforting yourself. It's Psalm 131, and here's the pivotal line. The psalmist says, "But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me." Now, I know the translation says soul, but the root in Hebrew is nephesh, and nephesh means your self, your core self, the essence of who you are. It literally means neck. It can also mean soul, but it's getting at something very practical and concrete and embodied. It's getting at the essence of who you are. Nefesh. So what the psalmist is saying is that he has learned to calm and quiet himself. I have calmed and quieted my soul. In other words, I have soothed myself. I have brought comfort to my anxiety. Now, what's absolutely fascinating is that the language, the imagery that the psalmist invokes is that of a weaned child and its mother. That's the image that the psalmist uses to illustrate what he's talking about here. And it's a perfect image. Bear with me and you'll see how brilliant this analogy is. A weaned child is a little child that has learned how to go without milk from the mother's breast. A weaned child has learned how to self-soothe just enough so that it can wait for solid food at mealtimes rather than immediately needing to nurse like it did when it was a baby. Okay, that's the metaphor the psalmist is using. But look at the language. I have calmed and quieted myself like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is myself within me. What is going on here? The psalmist is talking about two parts of himself. Do you see it? His adult self and his younger self. And he's saying that his adult self has learned to care for his younger self. And that his younger self has learned to trust in his adult self. This verse uses a poetic structure called a chiasma to compare two things. A chiasma like makes an X. So it's comparing the adult self and the child self. And here's, maybe you can hear the chiasma as I read the sentence. But I, my adult self, have calmed and contented my child self, like a weaned babe on its mother. Like a weaned babe, I, my child self, am with my adult self. In other words, the psalmist puts himself in the place of both the mother and the weaned child. And here's how Hebrew scholar Robert Alter puts it. He says, the psalmist is able to give himself the kind of reassuring calm that a loving mother gives the weaned child whom she comforts. The psalmist pictures his adult self as a mother and at the same time pictures his child self as a weaned child resting contentedly on his adult self's chest, trusting his adult self to care for him well. The entire image is one of self-care, in which one part of me cares for the other part of me, in which the adult part of you brings comfort, kindness, care, soothing to the younger part of you. Have you learned how to bring comfort and care and soothing to yourself? Look, this is about the Big Six. If you are unfamiliar with the Big Six, you may want to go back and listen to podcast episode 2 way back there. The Big Six refers to the 6 things that every child needs from their parents so that their brain will develop in a healthy way. And what I want you to see today is that when I ask, what is your posture toward yourself? I'm asking you to consider if you are attuned to yourself. Are you aware when you're in pain? Attunement is the first of the Big Six. So are you attuned to yourself when you are struggling? And when I say what's your posture toward yourself, I'm also asking you to consider if you are emotionally responsive to yourself when you are having a hard time. Do you engage your own heart when you are suffering? Do you attempt to regulate your own affect when you are dysregulated? And when you're not doing well, do you give yourself permission to feel your negative emotions? And then the final of the Big Six, repair. Do you seek to repair with yourself when you do harm to your own heart and body with self-contempt? Because as Dan Allender puts it, you don't have to respond to your story by joining in violence against yourself. You can respond to your story the way God does, with kindness toward your frailty. Look, kindness in and of itself begins to disrupt the power of evil. I want to say that again. Merely asking the question, what would kindness look like for me here, will disrupt the power of evil waged against you. Kindness has that power. Some people are worried that if I start to be kind and compassionate with myself, I'll become lazy or unmotivated and I'll never change and never grow. And the reality is just the opposite. In fact, in Romans 2, Paul writes that it is the kindness of God that leads to repentance. Repentance, growth. If that's true, and it is, what is keeping you from responding to your heart and body with kindness rather than contempt, rather than striving, rather than enduring, rather than pushing through? Have you made a list of those things that bring your body a sense of calm, soothing, comfort? What music? What music brings your body pleasure, calm, grounding? Have you made a playlist? And if you have, will you be kind enough to your body the next time it is dysregulated to put on some headphones and listen to music that calms you? Look, this can take 5 minutes. This does not need to be a long endeavor. The point is, are you willing to bring kindness, even if it's only a 5-minute song that is beautiful to you, to bring that goodness to your suffering body? If it's not music, what is it? Is it hot baths? Is it massage? Is it taking an extra yoga class the next day because you're having a hard time? Is it doing 10 minutes of yoga in the privacy of your own home, simply because it connects you to your body and allows you to be with yourself? The bottom line is that when we begin to treat ourselves with kindness rather than contempt, it awakens our unmet longings for genuine care and comfort. And this is problematic. When you begin to get a taste of something that you have experienced very little of, it awakens your need for more. We don't want to bring kindness, care, and comfort to our own bodies because we don't want to get connected to how much longing, unmet longing, we have here. We don't want to feel the ache of unmet need. And for some of us, the desire for comfort and care actually brings a sense of humiliation. Why? Because if you let yourself feel your need for comfort, it means that you actually have needs. And for many of us, to be needy is a bad thing, a shameful thing, a pathetic thing. I mean, can't you hear the contempt in the word pathetic? How is it that your need for kindness and care has become something worthy of the label pathetic? The answers to all of these questions will inevitably be found in your story, or better said, in your stories. Particularly your stories when you were younger, because young children have such immense need for comfort, for care, for kindness when things get hard. So I want to end by inviting you, if you are interested in doing violence to the kingdom of darkness, if you are interested in waging war against the enemy of your heart, as surprising as it may sound, one of the best ways you can do that is by beginning to bring kindness and care and comfort to your heart, particularly when you are struggling and in need. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And I also want to thank Scott Lawman for the episode artwork for today's episode. It's a painting that he has done that I think beautifully captures the content of today's episode. So thank you, Scott Lawman.